A lot of efforts go into working on your university application and getting your I-20s and then preparing for a visa interview. Sometimes the effort you put in, the time, and maybe the resources you put into the entire process. It's very sad when, the visa interview does not go the way you expected. Now, you don't have to lose hope, especially if you have an opportunity to, first of all, listen to the experiences of other visa applicants like yourself. Now, the most important thing is that most of them are available. However, when it comes to the people who actually make the decisions, the visa denials or approval, hardly do you have an opportunity to interact with them. And making matters worse, everybody who gets refused, especially for a non-immigrant visa, get a document we call 214B. This is a generic document that contains information that is given to almost everyone that gets denied at the embassy. It makes it confusing. What did you do wrong to get your visa approved, and what can you do to improve your chances on the second attempt? Luckily, the Fed Effect has a collaboration with Argo Visa. Argo Visa is a team of former visa officers. These are individuals who have been working and approving and denying visas, so they understand your situation better to be able to help you. Today, we are fortunate to have one of them to interact with us, Lisa, to let us know what goes into an approval or a denial of visa. And if you are preparing for a visa interview, what should you do to increase your chances of getting approved? Let me know where you're watching us from if you're just tuning in. This is the biggest study abroad content platform, and we are happy to interact with a former visa officer to let us know an insider insight into what goes into approval or a denial. Let me bring my guest on and then we get started. Hi, Lisa. How are you doing?
Hi, Fred. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you for asking. We interacted, was it 2 years ago?
Has it been that long
Yeah,
already?
it was like 2 years ago. All right. So a little bit introduction to our viewers who did not join us the other time and the new viewers.
Yeah, so my name is Lisa. I'm a consultant. I work with Argo Visa. I've been with them for close to 6 years now. And Argo Visa basically is a group of former visa officers that no longer work for the US government and have now turned their attention towards helping people prepare for their visa interview. So that means helping them understand what the qualifications for the visas are, what consular officers are looking for in those visa interviews, and most importantly, helping our clients prepare in a way that's tailored for their specific situation to do as best as they can in their visa interview.
Awesome. So we're glad to have you on and the experiences you bring on board. This is a question a lot of people want to find out from you being an ex-visa officer. What does the Trump presidency mean for visa denials and approval?
Yeah, that's the $1 million question everybody is asking now. I wish that I was more optimistic, but I have to say, everything that Trump has said and done up to this point does indicate that things are only going to get more challenging for people applying for visas rather than easier, especially, if we're talking about student visas. I do think that things are going to be a little bit more heavily scrutinized than they were before. There are things that the Trump administration has already done that, kind of create a chilling effect, even if there isn't like an actual new regulation. I mean, I think OPT is one of those examples, by going into workplaces, by checking up on, whether or not people are, doing their, if everybody there, has the proper paperwork, et cetera, means that employers might think twice about hiring somebody who's in the US on a visa. The other things that have already happened is the visa interview waiver time period has been reduced. So it used to be that if you had qualified already for a US visa and you were applying for that, same visa within, I think it's 48 months, 4 years, that you didn't need to go in for a visa that you didn't need to go in for a visa interview, that interview would be waived. That time has now reduced down to 12 months. Wow. And if you are looking to change your visa category, you don't qualify for it at all. So you have to be applying for the same category of visa within 12 months now in order to qualify for interview waiver. So that's one of the solid concrete changes that we've already seen. Another big change that we're anticipating is going to be happening any day now are travel bans similar to the ones that we had during the first Trump administration. We anticipate those travel bans are going to be even more strict and perhaps apply to more nationalities than the first one did.
Wow. Right. So if you're preparing for any category of visa, then you need the maximum preparation, and that's where Argo Visa comes in. Remember, Argo Visa is a team of former visa officers. Lisa works with Argo Visa, and so to have the opportunity to interact with Lisa one-on-one, they have all the time to go through your DS-160 application, DS-260 application, so that the effort you put into securing an admission, a scholarship, if you have a petition filed for you, a lot of effort, time goes into this. Do not wait to get your visa denied. Talk to a former visa officer to help you. And of course, I'll be sharing the link you can use to book a one-on-one consultation with Argo Visa. If you know somebody preparing for a visa interview, please share the link with them. We are live on TikTok, and we are live on Facebook, also on Instagram, as well as X or Twitter. And then we are also live on Facebook as well. So we are live across about 5 different platforms at the moment. And so click on the link, automatically you join the draw, which we'll have at the end of the session. Lisa, let's get started. So a lot of people are wondering, how do one become a visa officer?
Well, believe it or not, most people who join the Foreign Service and then become visa officers, the people that you meet interviewing you at the visa window, usually join because they appreciate other cultures and want the opportunity to live in countries other than the US, to learn about different value systems and to get to know people other than Americans. So there is an appreciation and a belief that getting to know each other as in Americans and the other nationals is a good thing and is a positive thing for our country to have people come to the United States. So there's it's actually very competitive, quite difficult to get into the Foreign Service. You take a written exam, an oral exam, you go through a lot of national security checks. However, you might be surprised to learn that once you're in the Foreign Service, you only get 6 weeks of training before you are considered a visa officer. So that is not very much time for visa officers to learn about every category of visa, all the requirements, all the ways that we anticipate that people are going to come to the window, and being prepared for that and being sure that we are only allowing in legitimate travelers who are going to the US for the reasons they say they're going to the US and that will use their visa properly. So it's pretty intense process. I think the other interesting thing to know about visa officers that can be helpful to people who are interviewing for their visa is to know that not every visa officer joined the Foreign Service to do visa interviews. In fact, a lot of them join to do political work or economic work, but they're required to do at least one tour interviewing people for visas. And there's a variety of reasons for that. But that means the person you're talking to may not necessarily be an extrovert, may not necessarily be somebody who planned on talking to, a lot of people all day, every day. Did we lose you, Fred?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can.
All right, great. So this is not like a profession that somebody says, I'm going to school. For example, if I'm studying college student personnel, I want to work in a university or a college. So you can go to school to I want to be a visa officer, right?
That's right. You get people with all kinds of backgrounds in the Foreign Service who become visa officers. Sometimes people straight out of college, sometimes people who've retired from an entirely different career that have just joined the Foreign Service and are now visa officers. You get music majors, political science majors. That's why it's really important when you're preparing for your visa interview, not to make assumptions about the person that is interviewing you, and be prepared to address any concerns that they may have.
Right. So, while you were serving as a visa officer, what was the maximum number of people you interviewed or you were assigned by your supervisor to interview in a day?
Yeah, there is no maximum. And I think that, knowing that can help people understand why visa officers are in a hurry and they can be abrupt. So there is a maximum number of appointments that the entire section will have scheduled for the day. And every post, runs a little bit differently. Managers can manage their operations, as they like at each consulate and embassy. But generally, the way it works is we have, a certain number of people that need to be interviewed by ourselves and our colleagues. And the sooner we interview everybody, the sooner we can finish being at the window and start doing some of the administrative work that we also have. So, because you're working as a team, you don't want to be the visa officer that's the slowest, because that means everybody else has to interview more people and take that burden from you. So everybody is trying their best to make decisions as quickly as possible.
Right. So, that means that there is not a specific number of minutes you are supposed to spend as a visa officer on a certain interview. So one interview could be a minute or two, another could take 5 minutes. Is that the case?
Yeah, that's correct. That's correct. Sometimes interviews don't even take a minute, sadly enough. But on average, I would say, especially if we're talking about student visas, you can anticipate 3 questions on average. I think at a less busy embassy, maybe 3 to 5. At a very busy embassy, two or three questions. And that's your opportunity. You have, those questions are your opportunity to demonstrate that you're qualified for the visa.
How does it feel to be the one to determine whether somebody gets a visa or not?
That's an interesting question. I think it feels probably the way you think it feels. Generally, everybody's trying to do their best to say yes to the students that they believe whose primary purpose is to go to the US to study and is going to return to their home country. And when you say yes to somebody like that, it feels great. It feels awesome. You meet all kinds of talented, amazing people when you work at the visa window. And to be able to say yes to them, congratulations, that's a wonderful feeling. Sometimes, however, though, we meet people who we genuinely like and we want to say yes to, but logically we know they don't meet the requirements. And it's hard to say no, especially in the beginning. It's hard to say no. I think after some time, being humans, you do start to get used to that feeling. And so if you feel like there's a lack of sensitivity on your visa officer's part, it's not because they're heartless. It's because they've made that decision dozens and dozens of times that day already. Never mind if they've been sitting at that window for a year or 2 years.
Well, I love dogs. You have dogs?
Sorry, yeah, I have a dog. He's ferociously guarding my front door. He's about this big.
Oh, awesome. So how many do you have?
Just one. Just one. He's a Cavapouchon, just a little fluff ball.
Awesome. All right, moving on. So, when it comes to approving a visa, does your mood affect it? For example, technically your productivity in the morning when you start working is not the same as when the day is coming to a close. So does that mood kind of affect your visa decisions?
I think it's really personality dependent. And I know there's a lot of people out there who say, oh, apply in the morning. But if you get somebody who's not a morning person, who isn't quite awake, then it's not great. I mean, I do think in general, towards the end of the day, people are trying to finish up as soon as they can. They've already interviewed many people. They still have paperwork that they have to get to. And so, maybe it's just like normal human psychology that officers are more in a rush at the end of the day than at the beginning of the day. But I wouldn't panic if your visa interviews at the end of the day. I feel quite confident that just as many people get approved between the hours of 3 and 4 p.m. as they do between 8 and 9 a.m.
Awesome.
At any rate, it's not something you can control, so there's no point in worrying about it, right?
Right. If you're just tuning in, I'm speaking with Lisa from Argo Visa Lisa is a former visa officer. Let me have your questions in the chat. If you had an opportunity to interact with a former visa officer, what questions are you going to ask them? And, what country are you watching us from? What category of visa are you preparing for? Now, later on the program, I'll let you in so that you can interact, directly with Lisa. And also, if you're preparing for any category of visa, please don't wait till you get denied before you seek for help. Try and schedule a conversation with a former visa officer before you speak with a visa officer at the embassy. This is very important. People regret it, and later on they make their stuff more complicated. Imagine a former visa officer going through your DS-160, going through your DS-260, having a mock session with you, asking you the questions and correcting your answers before you go for a visa interview. It makes you more confident and very prepared before you face the actual visa interview. And let's move on, Lisa. So when it comes to F1 visa of interviews, what makes it so unique? So there are a lot of categories of visas. What makes the F1 visa interview, or I would generalize it, maybe F1, J1, M1, since they are all student categories? What makes them unique?
I think the unique challenge with any visa that you're using to study in the US, but also requires that you demonstrate ties to your home country, is, that you're necessarily going to be leaving your home country for at least a year, sometimes up to 4 years or more. And so the challenge then is to convince the visa officer that you have really compelling reasons to return to your home country, ties that bind you are going to bring you back, while at the same time, explaining the program that you're participating in the US that's going to keep you away from your home country for quite a few years. I think the other challenge is, most students are quite young. And so, if you're fresh out of high school, 17, 18 years old, to be able to talk about what you're going to be doing 5 years, 7 years from now when you finish your education in your home country is something that most young people don't really have their arms wrapped around yet. And so I think that's kind of what makes the student visa category uniquely hard, unlike a B1, B2, where you say, oh, I'm going to go to the US to go to Disneyland for a week. I have to be back because I work. Like, that's a much simpler narrative to explain, or situation to explain to the officer than what a student has. I think the other challenge that we're increasingly seeing more and more, Fred, are for non-traditional students. Like, it's always been a little more complicated as somebody who's older going for like a master's program, for example, or older and going for their first bachelor's degree or second bachelor's degree, to explain kind of like why now. But I think there's more scrutiny now than before. And so those answers have to be even more compelling than before.
Right. I think you kind of touched on that. My next two questions were going to be the highlights of F1 visa interview or student visa interviews. Then we come to the red flags. I mean, what prompts a visa officer to say that no, there's a red flag in this student application?
Well, the first and most obvious red flag for any visa applicant is if we feel like they're not telling us the truth. So being genuine, being authentic in your visa interview really is the key. And it's so hard when you're feeling nervous. And especially because on the one hand, we're telling you to prepare. So you're not, you're giving prepared answers. Yeah. But at the same time, you have to talk to the officer like you're having a normal, natural conversation, as if you're telling a friend why it is you want to go to the United States. So that's the first red flag, is if we sense these answers are memorized, or if we don't believe what you're saying based on, your communication style.
Right.
I think go ahead.
No, go on. Go ahead.
I think the second red flag is giving rote answers. So, for example, if we ask you, oh, why'd you choose the University of Washington? And you just recite something off of the website, as hard as it is to pick out that information and memorize it and deliver it perfectly, I think the officer is going to find that really hard to believe. And then lastly, of course, if you don't mention in any way in your visa interview, even if you're not asked, you need to mention it, what it is about this program in the US that's going to be beneficial to you when you return to your home country. I think that's another red flag.
Wow. If you're watching us preparing for a visa interview, please take notice of this. And remember the session will be live across all the Fred Effect social media platforms after we are done. So you have an opportunity to go rewatch it and then take notes as well. There's I don't know if it's a misconception or not that almost every visa officer is a psychologist. Is it true?
No, but we are trained to spot a lie a million miles away. So if your plan is to come in and lie to the visa officer, I think that most likely you will be refused your visa. That's best case scenario. Worst case scenario is the officer catches you in the lie. They make note of your lie, and now you've lost credibility for any future visa application. So no, not every visa officer is a psychologist, but we are trained to identify when somebody isn't being truthful. And so it's not a good idea to go in with a lie. And you know what? Even if you are able, like even if you're an amazing liar, almost always the truth is better and qualifies you more for the visa. I can't tell you the number of times I've had consultations with clients and I say, okay, well, tell me why do you want to go to the United States? And they give me their reason. And I know it's not true. And I say, okay, no, but just between you and me, like, why are you really going to the US? And then they tell me the truth. And I'm like, that's a much, much better answer. If I was a visa officer listening to the real reason you've just given for going to the US, I would probably grant you that visa. So let's work with the truth.
Awesome. Let's work with the truth. So I know maybe all the visa officers are educated and obviously from the US. Do you have a soft spot for somebody that is going to the university you graduated from, or maybe the city you're from, maybe your parents are from?
I think that yes is the short answer. I mean, especially if you're going to the university that the officer went to, just because I know that's a legitimate university
Right.
versus if you go to a university I've never heard of. So yeah, you can have very human biases, both in favor and against people in your visa interviews, but it doesn't happen very often. And at the end of the day, we are trained to apply the rules and regulations. So even if somebody's going to my university, if I don't think they're ever going back to their home country, sometimes you just have to make the hard decision to say no.
Awesome. So we mentioned some of the red flags. So as a visa officer, if an F1 student or a student applicant is approaching you, what are some of the highlights you were expecting? You mentioned, they being able to indicate the reason why they will return to their home country, home ties. What are some of the highlights you were expecting?
Yeah, I mean, everybody's situation is different. And so what we do in a consultation is be very specific, about that specific individual's challenges and their highlights. But I think one that applies to everybody that can be a highlight no matter what your situation is enthusiasm. I always say it's harder to say no to a person with a dream than a person who already looks like they're expecting a no at the visa interview. So no matter who you are, no matter what your situation is, I think if you show enthusiasm for what you can learn in the US and how it's going to brighten your future in your home country, that is automatically going to be a highlight, an easy, plus in your column, and that's something that anybody can achieve. So have that positive energy, try to have an open disposition when you're speaking with the visa officer, and just let them know how much this means to you.
Awesome. Let a visa officer know how much this means to you. So remember that if this visa means a lot to you, it will be important to talk to a former visa officer. How do you schedule a meeting? Please use the link I'm sharing on the screen. Then you can book a consultation. And then there is a whole team of former visa officers. You may be lucky to speak to Lisa, but there are other visa officers who you schedule a one-on-one meeting with. You can have a 30-minute package, 45-minute, and even an hour package. Lisa, talk to us about Argo Visa. If an applicant books a 30-minute consultation, what actually goes into it?
Well, it kind of depends on what the client needs. So if they've been refused before, The first thing we do is identify what went wrong in their first visa interview. So that way we know what the challenge is that needs to be overcome. Ideally, though, people would come to us before they get refused, and then that way we can prepare them as best as possible for their first visa application, because your best chance is your first chance. The officer doesn't have any preconceived notions about you, and you have a clean slate. Whereas once you've had a visa refusal, now you have a hurdle to overcome, and you have to convince a second or sometimes third or fourth officer that the previous officers didn't make the right decision, or that something has changed about your situation that has taken you from unqualified to qualified. So first thing we do, identify, okay, what challenges? Is it that you're new and you don't know what to expect, or is it that you've been refused before and we need to get to the bottom of why you were refused? Second thing we do is then help develop that strategy to help you overcome your challenges, answer any questions that the client may have. So that's what is generally going to happen in a 30-minute package. Now, sometimes clients come to us with really complicated situations, and we try to help them as much as we can in 30 minutes. But people with complicated situations really should be booking a 45-minute or a 60-minute consultation.
Yeah. So is this a one time? So all the 45 minutes or the 30 minutes is held at once, or it's divided into sections? How does it go?
It's one conversation. It's one 35-minute conversation, 45-minute and 60-minute, which is the beauty of the 45-minute and the 60-minute. I mean, really, honestly, everybody should be booking a minimum 45-minute if they can, right? Because only in the 45-minute conversation do we potentially have the time to conduct a mock interview. And it does happen within that 45 minutes. So we might take, for example, the first 30 minutes talking about your situation, clarifying the strategy, letting you know what the goal in your particular visa interview should be, and then doing a mock interview so that you can practice the strategy, and even more importantly, so we can give you feedback as to how you did in your mock interview, what can be improved about your answers, what was done well, what wasn't done quite as well, so that you go in knowing what to expect and being ready to implement, the strategy that we've devised for you. 60-minute, the hope there is that we're able to answer all your questions in time to do 2 mock interviews or more.
Awesome. So if you're preparing for your visa interview, if you are already in the United States, you've petitioned for a family member already, you know this process, especially when it comes to an immigrant visa, takes a lot of time. Now, if you're lucky to secure an interview date, please make good use of this. Do not spend all this time, resources to file a petition for a family member, and they go to the embassy, they get denied. And then if you are, lucky to secure a job, whether H-1B, whatever category of visa, try and talk to a former visa officer before you go for your visa interview. And I'm going to show you in a little bit how you can, schedule the meeting. So when you click on the link I'm showing on the screen, let me do that real quick. So if you click on this link, it will take you to this website. Now you can scroll through to look at some of the, people who have already consulted Argo Visa and have, successes, and then you can click on next. So when you create an account, so you put in your email over here, you create an account, and then you can continue. Alternatively, you can continue as a guest, so you have to put in your email, and then it gives you the packages. So there are 45 minutes package, 30 minutes package, and an hour package, and then you decide which one you prefer. So Lisa, going on, my next question to you will be, preparing for the F1 visa interview. Now, I'm more focused on the F1 visa interview because my platform is mostly for students who want to study in the United States. So what are some of the preparatory tips? And I know that you have not been on the other side of being interviewed by a visa officer before. Have you gone through that experience before?
I definitely have gone through the experience of applying for a visa, including an immigrant visa, actually. And, you get interviewed at port of entry as well. So I do understand that it's really nerve wracking. Even as an American citizen, coming in through the port of entry, putting that American passport up there, I feel nervous. I feel guilty for something that I haven't done. So I do understand that there's a lot of good advice out there, and it's easier said than done. But that's why I think practice is so key, and the mock interviews are so key. I mean, what I do with my clients is I give them a really realistic interview. So it's very easy for me to go back to my visa officer days and remember the feeling of being a visa officer interviewing, the last applicant of the day. Yeah. And I give those vibes to my clients so that they're not caught off guard when they get it at the embassy, because I always say, I'd rather you be prepared for the worst case scenario and be pleasantly surprised than to go into the visa interview expecting one experience and being caught off guard.
Right. So one of the major preparation is to schedule a one-on-one consultation with a former visa officer. Obviously, there are a lot of people that share their experience online. You could have friends and family, but understand that everybody's situation is different. Now, even if you're going to the same university, you're going to pursue the same program, you guys are twins, your situation with a visa officer at the embassy will not be the same as your brother or your sister. So you have that opportunity to listen to people and hear their story, what the visa officer asked them, what they responded. And to be honest with you, right, most people that go through the visa process, once they get approved, they forget everything that happened. They are super excited. And then when people get denied too, they are a bit angry. And remember, you don't enter the embassy with your cell phone. So when people come out, sometimes the story they come out with is very different from exactly what happened when they went for the visa interview. So Lisa, my next question will be: apart from scheduling a visa, an appointment with Argo Visa, and also listening to other people's experiences, what are some of the preparatory tips you will give to anyone preparing for a visa interview, especially with a student visa?
Yeah, I want to emphasize something that you said earlier that I think is more important now than ever, which is it really is important to prepare, because wait times are only going to get longer with the interview waivers being reduced down to just 12 months and staff reductions across the US federal government. Wait times are only going to get worse. And once you've been, so as a student, you oftentimes qualify for priority booking for your visa interview so that you can make your program appointment on time. But once you've been refused, you no longer get that priority. So the second time you go and apply for your visa, you might be shocked at how long the wait time is. So number one, definitely prepare. Number two, I think, is the key that I think most people forget, and that is tying in what it is you're doing in the US and how it's going to benefit you when you come home.
Yeah.
I think because it's a student visa interview, everybody thinks, oh, I need to go in and really talk about what I want to study in the US and demonstrate that I'm a student. That's actually the easy part.
Yeah.
The hard part is proving that after you get that education, you would want to come back to your home country. So really thinking about, and especially for young people, projecting yourself out 5 years from now, where are you going to be? What are you going to be doing? And how would this program have benefited you? Because if you can explain that, you're 90% there in terms of qualifying for the visa. Then the last part is just talking about your finances. And with the financial part, this is not like, oh, if I demonstrate a magic number, if my education is going to cost me $75,000, as long as I have $76,000, I'm going to get the visa. No, it's, does the whole plan make sense? For somebody who's coming back to their home country, does it make sense to invest this amount in their education? Because if it does make financial sense, officer knows that friends, family, whatever support network you have is going to help cover the tuition costs. Officer isn't afraid that universities aren't going to get their money.
Right.
What they're afraid is that you're not a credible student or you're not coming back to your home country, and it's their job to ensure that in the visa interview.
Wow. Interesting. All right. So before an applicant approaches you in the window, what information do you have about this applicant? So an F1, a student visa applicant is approaching you. As a visa officer, what information do you have before you even start the interview?
It depends. If you've never been to the US, you've never been for a visa interview, then really the only information we probably have about you is what you have given us on the DS-160 and your I-20. And one pro tip here, try not to repeat that information if you don't have to. So for example, if I say, hey, hi, how are you? What brings you in today? And you say, I'm applying for a student visa to study at the University of Washington. Say, okay, well, I already knew that because I'm looking at your DS-160. Like, now I have to ask you another question. And by the way, this is like the 1,000th question I've asked today. And I wish I didn't have to ask you another question to get some useful information. If you've been refused before, we'll have the notes from the previous visa officer, or even if you've been approved before for other types of visas, we'll see the notes from the officer for that approval. If you've been to the US before, we'll see any entries and exits. We'll be able to see any notes that CBP has put in on you. And of course, if you've committed crimes or if you're in any way a threat to national security, we have our confidential databases there as well. So in short, if you've done something that you don't want the visa officer to know, best approach is to assume that they know, because there's a good chance that they do. If you've got nothing to hide, then you don't need to worry about. The officer's not up the night before scrolling through your social media, like trying to learn about you and preparing for their interview with you the next day. So in most cases, literally what the officer knows is what's on your DS-160, any notes from previous visa applications, and any interactions with CBP.
Awesome. So we're going to pick some questions from the comment, and this one is from Facebook. From Francis. Francis is asking, if a visa is refused, how long will it take for an applicant to apply for a new visa? What do you suggest, Lisa?
Well, that really depends on why you were refused. If you were refused because you don't meet the qualifications for the visa, then of course you don't want to just keep going back and racking up refusals. You should probably wait a little bit until you do have stronger ties to your home country or a better financial situation. However, if you feel that you're qualified for the visa, but the visa interview just didn't go well, that's when working with a company like Argo Visa can make all the difference, because we can help you see, okay, these were the mistakes that were made, or this is why the visa officer refused you. Let's talk about how we can be sure that they don't use that same reason to refuse you again the next time. So it really depends. Sometimes the answer is reapply right away. You've got nothing to lose. Sometimes the answer is it is better to wait for a while, but the answer is never just go back and do the same thing.
Awesome. All right. So if an applicant has a visa to other countries, like have a Canadian visa in their passport, a UK visa or United Kingdom visa, does it impact or increase their chances of getting their US visa approved? And as a visa officer, do you even care at all? Going through the passport, you see other visas in them. Does that impact their visa approval?
Yeah, it can. It can impact it positively if you have a travel history to countries that are not too unlike the United States, i.e., other economies where there's a lot of economic opportunity for somebody in your situation, and you've come back. That does demonstrate to the officer that you're not in an economically desperate situation, that you're not going to, go and work at the first opportunity. For B1, B2s, it's kind of even if it's not like Canada or UK, if you've just demonstrated you're somebody who travels and that this is a normal next step for somebody who likes to vacation in other countries, that can be helpful as well.
Awesome. So let me know how many minutes do you have for me today?
I was planning on an hour, so 20 minutes more.
Okay, awesome. Right. So If you're just tuning in, you're not late. Remember, we are speaking with a former visa officer. The idea is to give you an insider insight about what goes on when you apply for a visa. And if remember, the session will be live across all the Fred Effect social media platforms. Also, you have that opportunity exclusively to schedule a one-on-one consultation with a former visa officer before you go for your visa interview. I would highly encourage you to take up this opportunity so that it would improve your chances of getting approved. All right. So Lisa, so you mentioned that visa officers, if one has been there before or has applied for a visa previously, they have notes from the previous visa officer. I want to find out, why is it that visa officers are not allowed to interview an applicant 2 times? Like, if they denied the applicant, why are they not allowed to interview the applicant?
Okay, I lost you for. I think
I think sorry. What I'm asking is, am I better now? Okay. Let's see. I think the connection was stable today. Please know if you can hear this. Okay. I'm having trouble with my connection here. I don't know what is happening. They had great internet. Let me know if you can hear me.
I can hear you. Oh,
okay, awesome. Thank you. So I was asking, you made us understand that visa officers mostly have access to the note that was left by the previous visa officer if an applicant is applying for the second time or maybe has been denied before. I want to understand, what kind of notes do you have from this visa officer, and why are visa officers not allowed to interview an applicant for the second time?
So there's actually no rule that says an officer can't re-interview the same visa applicant. It's more of a courtesy that embassies extend to people. So if you've been refused by an officer, they will try to make sure that your second interview is with a different officer, so you don't feel like you're being stonewalled by the same person that has made a judgment against you. I mean, of course, if I refused you last week and now I'm interviewing you again, I'm going to trust my previous judgment, and that is definitely going to be a strong bias against you. In countries that have smaller posts where there might just be 1 or 2 visa officers working, of course, this is unavoidable, and sometimes applicants do get re-interviewed by the same visa officer. But in really big, in places with really big posts, like Lagos or Abuja, if you're going for a second or third visa interview, and you see the same visa officer, there's no harm in saying, "Oh, hi, I believe you've interviewed me before." Be prepared, though, because the officer isn't required to hand off your case. And at that point, they probably will hand off your case. But if they don't, then you should be prepared to say something like, but last time I didn't tell you that, and then give them a reason to make a different decision.
Awesome. And I was talking about the notes that, you have access to from previous visa officers if the applicant has been denied before. What kind of notes? Like, I didn't approve this visa because, or what kind? How is that note like?
So generally the notes are the justification for the decision. So if a visa is refused, it'll be, the qualifications that weren't met, either lack of ties, if it doesn't make financial sense, or the officer just doesn't think that the applicant is a credible student. If you lie or misrepresent yourself, for sure that is going to be in the visa officer's notes. If they catch you red-handed in the lie, that will definitely be noted. Even if they suspect that you're lying, that they will note that observation in their notes as well. So yeah, I mean, in terms of the whatever problem or challenge you had in your first visa interview, just know that is likely going to carry over into your second visa interview. Officers are going to trust their colleagues more than they trust you. So if their colleague has written in the notes that this person was dishonest, and today you're trying to say, no, I've always been honest, that's going to be a tough sell unless you have really prepared and know exactly what to say and how to say it in a way that a consular officer or visa officer is going to find compelling and credible. So that's what we do, at Argo, is we say, okay, this is probably why you were refused, i.e., this is what I anticipate are in your refusal notes. Let's talk about that. How do we overcome it?
Awesome. All right. So Lisa, the interesting thing is that when you are reapplying for a visa, you are being asked, if you've been refused before. The answer is yes. And then you are asked for an explanation. Now, bearing in mind that the visa officer who interviewed you also left a note for the next visa officer, and you have no idea of what this note is, especially because you are given 214B document, which we all know is a generic document. Now, if the applicant writes something different in the DS-160, and then the visa officer also left a different note, does that mean it's a straight denial?
No, I mean, we know that applicants don't know why they were refused. We know that they only get the 214B letter, but the example you gave is the reason I have the philosophy that I have, which is the less you say on your DS 160 about your refusal, the better. I think in the vast majority of cases on that reason for refusal, the simple answer 214B is enough. And then you use your interview time to explain why 214B shouldn't have applied to you. And by that, I don't mean you say, well, 214B doesn't apply to me because I have home ties. It's, hey, listen, last time I didn't really explain that this program in the United States is, going to be really beneficial for me in my home country, because there is another school of thought that you can use that box to at least create opportunity for yourself to talk about your best qualifications. So you could put 214B despite, and then, a sentence or two or maximum 3 about, why you are qualified for the visa. What you shouldn't do is say 214B because I don't have ties to my home country, or 214B because I didn't demonstrate that I'm a credible student, because then it's like you're agreeing with the officer and you're really highlighting that fact for the next visa officer. So long answer short, either simply put 214B or the law under which you were refused, or say 214B despite, and then, list a couple highlights. Okay. We can help with that as well if you want to know, like, what should I put in that box? At Argo, we have 2 services. We have the consultation, so we can talk about that during the consultation. But we also have a DS-160 service where we help you fill out all the information for all the questions on the DS-160, and a visa officer actually looks at it and helps make any suggestions that you might need.
Yeah, apart from that, Argo Visa has, this free evaluation tool. So when you visit the website of Argo Visa, and I'll be presenting that real quick, you'll be able to, have a free evaluation to put in some answers and stuff like that to determine how prepared you are for visa interview. At least if you don't do anything at all, please use this free evaluation tool to assess how prepared you are before you go for your visa interview. So Lisa, my next question will be that if a student applicant has been refused a visa, on the second attempt, what should they change? Their funds, their financial support, their school, their program, what should they change?
Honestly, Fred, they should change their approach. They should think about their answers. Again, like I said, it depends on why you were refused. It doesn't help you to change your school if the school isn't the reason why you were refused. It doesn't help you to change your financial information if the financial information wasn't the reason why you were refused. Right. In fact, it can look like you are just grasping at straws, changing things on your application in hopes for a different decision. Usually the better strategy is to keep your information the same, unless you're actually later admitted into a better school. Then of course any visa officer would understand why you would change schools. But if you're changing schools just for the sake of changing schools and you don't have a good explanation for that, that's not going to help you.
Awesome. Sometimes during the visa interview, visa officers would get out of the window and talk to either their supervisor or a colleague, visa officer. What actually are they going to ask for?
Well, usually it's for a second opinion. Sometimes it's a colleague that we just like and respect, and we want to bounce ideas off of them. If it's a particularly unique case, could be that you have a new officer who just wants to double check, their understanding of the regulation, or with their supervisor. It could be that they're talking to a local staff member because the embassy, the real engine of any embassy or consulate, really is the local people that are hired to work there. And so if you're telling them something like, there's a booming fashion industry here, and the officer is pretty new to that city or country, they might ask a local staff member, hey, is it true that there's a booming fashion industry here? And so that they might be getting some cultural or local context from their local team member. What they are never doing when they talk to local staff is getting an answer from them. That officer is the sole person making the decision in that visa interview, and they're solely responsible for it too.
Right. How quick do you advise a visa applicant to reapply after denial?
So if they're qualified for the visa and they've prepared for their interview, then there's no reason not to reapply immediately. And I think this applies for a lot of students who, have a program date that they need to enter the US for by a certain time for. But like I said, you don't want to go in and just say the same things in your visa interview as you did before. You don't want to just randomly change things about your financial situation or your school and then go in and give the same answers that you did before. You'll be refused again. And the thing is the more refusals you have, the harder it is for a consular officer later to say yes to you, because now they're saying, I think my judgment of you is better than one colleague, two colleagues, three colleagues that interviewed you before. So the bar gets higher and higher with every refusal. So definitely understand why you were refused, the real reason why you were refused, right? Not just the 214B letter, and have a plan to overcome that before going back again.
Right. Douglas, so Drew, watching us on YouTube, I hope your question has been answered. Thank you for tuning in. We have close to 1,000 people watching us across our social media platforms. We are lucky to have a former visa officer, Lisa, to give us an insider insight into what goes into a visa denial and approval. Remember to take notes. Please pay attention to the information Lisa is giving. And most importantly, remember to schedule a one-on-one consultation with the Argo Visa team to guide you to prepare for your visa interview. If you're tuning in from any country, let us know which country you're tuning in from. Where are you watching us from? What platform are you tuning in from? So we are live on Instagram, we are live on TikTok, we are also live on YouTube, Facebook, and then X or Twitter. All right, Lisa, my next question to you would be, for a student visa, for example, what determines the number of years an applicant will have on their visa? Is it the length of their program of study? Because I know students who have maybe 2 years master's program, but they get like 3 years or 4 years visa. What actually determines that?
So it actually doesn't matter what the length of your visa is, because for a student visa, and I'm speaking specifically about student visas, you're admitted for what's called duration of status, meaning that once you have that visa and you enter the United States, you're allowed to stay as long as you are enrolled full-time as a student or doing CPT, OPT. So even if that visa expires, if you're still enrolled in school, if you're still doing what you're supposed to be doing, then you're in the US lawfully. So I wouldn't worry too much about, the time that's stamped on your visa. It should cover, the duration of your program. But officers also understand sometimes, 4-year programs can become 5-year programs. If you decide to change majors, you decide to take some additional courses, add on a minor, or double major, things like that. So there should be some flexibility there for you in terms of completing your studies, regardless of what the date on the visa is.
Right. For students who are already studying in the US and want their spouse to either visit or join them, and I know that that will determine what category of visa. What type of visa would you recommend? Should they go in for an F2, or maybe they should go in for a visitor's visa instead?
So a person can qualify for more than one visa type at a given moment, right? So you can apply for the F2 and or the B1, B2.
Right.
I think that it really doesn't matter which visa category you're applying for, because the
Right.
reason people get refused is for lack of ties. And
Mhm.
so the lack of ties or the requirement that you have ties to your home country applies to both the B1, B2 visa category
Right.
and the F2 visa. It used to be that F2 visas were fairly easy to qualify for, because all you had to demonstrate was I really am married to an F1 student visa
Mhm.
holder. But that really isn't the case nowadays. I think regardless of whether you're applying for the F2 or the B1, B2, the officer is evaluating not only do I think if whether you're coming back or whether or not I think your spouse is coming back. If I issue this visa to you, will you and your spouse still return to your home country? Is
Right.
your spouse more likely return if I don't issue this
Yeah.
visa to you? Right. And then it doesn't matter if it's an F2 or B1, B2, because the assumption is once you're in, you're going to stay if you don't, if you don't have those home ties. So I know there's a lot of hand wringing over, do I apply for an F2? Do I apply for a B1? It really doesn't matter, because the requirements are the same. Right. So B1, B2, you have to have a credible purpose of travel. Your credible purpose of travel in this instance is you're going to visit your spouse, and then you have to have ties to your home country. F2, to qualify, you have to be married to the F1 visa holder and home ties. So the requirements are the same.
So sometimes visa officers hardly pay attention, or sort of look into the face of applicant. They are always looking on the computer. Are they typing all the answers, or what are they doing?
Yeah, they're often typing what the applicant is saying.
Okay.
So noting down the basic facts and then the justification for their decision.
Right. For an F2 visa, coming back to that, for an F2 visa, would you recommend that someone with a PhD, a master's, or undergrad, what are the chances of getting approved? Is it being a PhD student, a master's student? And I'm looking at this in the sense that if somebody is applying for F2, it means that they are going to depend on an F1. Let's take into consideration that F1 are supposed to, visa holders are supposed to work on campus. Now, if this person is being sponsored by someone else home, and they say that another person is going to depend on them, do they still have a possibility of getting this visa approved?
So if an officer thinks that by you as an F2 applicant going to the United States that this is going to create economic hardship to the extent that you wouldn't be able to afford your life in the U.S. or you're going to need government assistance, then yes, that would be a reason to refuse. So, for example, if you're a spouse and you're traveling with 5 children to the US to stay with your husband, you would want to demonstrate how it is you're going to be able to afford as a family, for all of you to be in the United States while your spouse is in school and because the F2 isn't allowed to work.
Right. I remember in Accra embassy in Ghana, applicants, people are not allowed to even take pictures around the embassy. Is there some camera monitoring the movement and people outside the embassy showing to the visa officers before they get in?
Okay, so the answer to the first half of the question is yes, there's lots of cameras, lots of
Yeah.
security. Everything you can imagine is probably there and more, regardless of which country we're talking about. But no, the officer does not have time to be watching you approach the embassy. But that being said, you should be polite and follow the instructions given to you by any member of the embassy team. So if the first person you speak to in the consular section is a local staff member and they're giving you instructions about where to wait or what to do next until your turn, you want to be polite and pleasant to those people, because if they say, oh, that guy was a real jerk, even if they don't have a say in the decision that the officer makes, I mean, an officer is, going to be less inclined to do any favors for somebody who's been a real jerk.
Yeah. So our time is almost here. So I have two more questions. The first one is about students who want to invite their parents for graduation. What are some of the possible things that could impact, the this kind of visa? Obviously, it will be a B1, B2 visa. A student is graduating, they're inviting their parents over. What could possibly impact their approval or denial?
Yeah, we help a lot. We help a lot of parents going to the U.S. to visit their children, whether it's graduation or if their child is working in the U.S. on an H-1B, for example. The thing to know is that parents also have to have ties to their home country, and especially if they're already retired, that can be harder to demonstrate. And so, we talk to clients about like, okay, well, what are you doing in your life? Do you have other children in the home country? Do you have grandkids that you take care of? Do you volunteer in the community? And it's just about, explaining why their stay in the U.S. would be temporary, because otherwise the assumption is that parents are going to the U.S. To stay with their children because, they're going to do OPT or they've won the H-1B lottery. And so now parents are going to go and move in and stay with their children where, presumably they have a more comfortable life. So parents have to overcome the same challenges and hurdles that any other visa applicant does. Just because they have a credible purpose of travel, meaning, good reason to be going to the US, doesn't mean that they don't still have to demonstrate that they have a good reason for coming back.
Yeah, thank you so much, Lisa. You've cleared a lot of misconceptions about the visa application. There are cameras, but the visa officers do not have time to be watching you outside of the building. And also, when you get to the window, when they scan your DS-260, that's when they start having information about you. So they are not already prepared for you until you get to the window. Those misconceptions have been cleared. What other misconceptions do you want to clear? And general information to our viewers today?
I think the only thing that we haven't covered that a lot of people have questions about is what does it mean to be put into administrative processing? So administrative processing is a temporary refusal, and all it really means is the officer is not ready to make a decision in your case yet for whatever reason. And so that's a really useful tool for officers who want to look something up or ask a supervisor a question or get more information from the applicant. So if you're refused for administrative processing, at Argo Visa, we can help make an educated guess based on what you tell us about the interview as to why you're in administrative processing and how long that may take. But the key there is if you're found refused for administrative processing is to note, because as you say, Fred, it is kind of all a blur. As soon as you leave the embassy, it's easy to forget kind of key details. So know everything that happened in your visa interview, because I can give some clues as to what the administrative processing is for. And just know that it's a temporary refusal and not a reason to panic.
Right. All right. So it's been a great conversation with Lisa. I don't know if Lisa still have some time, but we have only 1 hour today, right?
Yeah, it's just 1 hour today. Awesome. I'd love to come back and talk to you again sometime.
Awesome. So it's been a great conversation with Lisa. If you are preparing for a visa interview, please schedule a one-on-one consultation with the Argo Visa team. We remember I had a conversation with Lisa some time ago, I think 2 years ago. That information is still on the Fred Effect platforms. Please take your time, go through some of these interviews. If you can visit the social media handles of Argo Visa, kindly do that. It's ARGO on YouTube and then TikTok, Instagram. They have a lot of videos, especially Lisa has made a lot of videos on the Argo Visa platforms that you can check them out. It would really help your preparation. If people have done something you've done before, you wouldn't be the first person to apply for a visa. A lot of people have already done that. Please do seek for information, seek for help. Don't get refused and then regret it. Lisa, it's been a great conversation. I really appreciate your time and thank you for. And I like your dog. Maybe one day, the dog should be in the video. All right. Thank you so much, Lisa.
It was my pleasure.
All right. So that was Lisa. Remember that if you're applying for a visa in whichever country you're applying for a visa, the DS-160, DS-260 is the same, but the appointment portal. So recently, Cote d'Ivoire, Sierra Leone, Nigeria, Ghana, they moved from the US Travel Docs, website to AVIT's portal. So that's why it is important to be updated with some of these things. The visa application portal, your uncle, your brother had used some years ago, that's not what you're using. And I like the new portal. Of course, a little bit of challenges here and there, but I think it's improved now. For example, you have an opportunity to reschedule your appointment like 4 times. Initially, it used to be 2, and now it's 4 times if you don't get a favorable date. Of course, you also have an opportunity to put in an emergency request. So if you are getting a date in maybe September, even though your program starts in July or August, don't panic. There's an opportunity to reschedule. There's also an opportunity to put in an emergency request. Make sure if you're a student, you have your I-20, you've paid your service fee, which is at $350, and also so that you type in a message or an email to request for an expedited appointment. And when given, you have an opportunity to reschedule for a closer date. So, this has been the Fred Effect. This is the Study Abroad podcast. It's been interesting having a good conversation with a former visa officer. I know you've learned a lot, and thank you for tuning in. I need you to be positive. There are a whole lot of things happening here. Please be positive. It's a process. The visa interview is a process. So, you just take your time and go through. That is part of life. So, I wish you all the best. I want you to be positive and know that everything will be fine. I'll see you in another video.